Hi, today I'm going to make a birthday card. This card is going to be for my sister Linda. I hope she likes it. I featured an owl, which as we all know is her trademark muse symbol, and I have shown a little bit of embossing folder action here, which I'm not going to illustrate in this video because it takes a little bit too much time. And I have a balloon popped up on some foam dots and a little hat. And the inside of the card, I have my little owl again peeking out with a saying. And this, because this card is black base, I used white craft ink for my symbol. So I'll show how to use white craft ink also. Okay, let me get started by showing you the materials list. The inks I'm using is Versafine, Memento Summer Sky, Memento Bahama Blue, and Stampin' Up! Pigment Ink White. This is a pigment ink. It's a little more wet than the dye inks, so you just need to be a little bit more careful with this. I'm using this stamp for the inside of my card. I'm also using this balloon, the larger balloon from the balloon celebration from Stampin' Up. I'll be using this one, and this Let Us Celebrate for the string. And this is my little owl that I'll be using. I'm also going to be using Scallop Square, and I have a special die cut which allows me to do die cut words. And here's just my happy birthday. And I die cut it with the white and the black and glued the two together to give this little drop shadow look. I hope you can see it. I also have pre-cut my papers. I'll have the dimensions listed below so that you can recreate it if you like. I'm also using the Flourish embossing folder by Darice. I believe you may have this, is very easily obtainable, and some pink material which will be the background of the card. I'm also going to be using the balloon punch from Stampin' Up! So that I can punch out the balloon. That will be this one. And of course the other standard things, tape, adhesive, foam tape. Okay, I'm going to be doing some coloring, so I have picked some blues, some pinks, some reds and browns for coloring my little owl here. And of course I'll be using the water pen since this is watercolor pencils. And that's all the materials that I need. I'm going to just jump right in and get started making a card. I'll be speeding this part up. The first thing is to adhere the panels to the mats. I could have used my ATG gun, but for a small panel like that, it's usually a lot easier to use a smaller tape runner, especially with the designer paper because it's thinner than cardstock. I have already embossed the pink panel. I'm not showing that later. Now I'm just adhering the panels together. Because the pink is embossed, you have to be a little bit generous with the tape so that it will stick. When I glue the panel to the card base, I have to be sure that I have the valley side up, which is the outside of the card. I decided not to close the card base just yet because it's easier to work with it open. And I'm using the white pigment ink to put my signature on it. Pigment ink is more wet than dye ink, so you have to be a little bit careful and not smear it. And now I'm moving on to making the panel for the inside of the card. I'm using my Misty tool. I've already put my stamps in place on the Misty tool to speed this up a little bit. So first I'm going to stamp my sentiment on the center panel for the inside of the card, making sure it hasn't moved. And I'm going to have to be doing some masking because the owl is peeking from behind the sentiment, so I needed to stamp it 2 times and cut it out, which you see here. So I just fussy cut the edges, and I'll use this as a mask to ensure that I can stamp behind it. You see me placing it really carefully, lining up the 2 stamps, and the owl is already ready to go in place. I'm double checking it. Yep, all right. So when you lift the mask, you'll see that the owl has been stamped as if he's behind it. I'll save this mask to use it with the stamp set later. And I have to clean this off because I need to use the owl again for the front panel. So getting the square and lining up the owl where I need it to be. And be sure at this step that you have cleaned that stamp well so that you don't transfer ink to your card base, your cardstock. And transferring it to the Misty and just inking it as usual. The Misty is a really great tool. I highly recommend that you get one if you haven't already. Because if it didn't stamp well the first time, I could just stamp it again. And now I'm moving on to the balloons. Because the balloons are 3 steps, I've already put them in place on the Misty. And I have the string for the balloon already in place also. But since I'm not using the corners, I have to be careful to make sure that I have it lined up properly. Alright, taking the smaller square, the first step to do is the silhouette, the larger stamp. Use the lighter ink to do that. And again, if it didn't stamp well, I could re-stamp it again, but I got a good impression the first time. Rather than try to move the second part over, I just picked it up and put it back in place. And you can just easily line these 2 stamps up with the printout and then transfer it back to the door. I had initially thought that I would leave the outline stamp in place, and you'll see that I tried to just line it up by eyeballing it, but I was getting frustrated trying to line it up, so I just gave up and just pulled it off and relined it up again. It just takes another second to do. The stamp is very forgiving, so even if you don't get it absolutely lined up perfectly, it still looks fine. It gives it a watercolor look. This is one of my favorite stamp sets from Stampin'. And now, because I didn't have a very large piece of paper, I taped some white cardstock on it to use it as a handle and slid it into the punch, lining it up so I could get a good punch out. through that way. And now I'm going to color. I have shown coloring a couple times. Just make sure you have 3 shades of each color you want to use. I'm speeding this part up a lot so that you don't have to watch it in slow motion. But just be sure to color the 2 owls together. Whatever the coloring you do on the front, do it on the inside one too. Now that I'm happy with the coloring, I've grabbed my aqua pen and I'm starting to do the blending. You have to be sure that you wipe off the tip of the pen between colors so that you don't transfer from one to the other, and hop around to make sure that you don't blend the colors in on top of each other. There was a little extra where I thought it needed a little bit more color, so I picked up the watercolor pencil and just used the tip of the pen right to the pencil. It doesn't hurt anything. And I'm going to sponge around the edges of the front panel with the black soot using my sponge dauber tool. It adds a little bit more interest to the panel. Now it's just a matter of assembling the different parts of the card. I'm using foam tape on this, so I want it popped up. I'm just eyeballing a good length of it. And you have to be really generous when you're watercoloring panels because the paper has a tendency to warp. That's why I'm using so much foam tape. To adhere the words, I could have used any adhesive. I'm showing glossy accents, which is, it dries completely clear. It's good for adhering little things like this. I could have also used the Tombow, but I felt that the glossy accents would have been better for it because it was so small and delicate. The tip of it is very easy to dab here and there. Whereas the Tombow, it's easy to put too much ink. Too much glue. You just have to give it a little press to give it a chance to adhere to the paper. Now it's time to adhere the balloon. The balloon needs to be double popped up with foam tape because it'll be partly over the owl panel, partly over the flat part of the card. So the part that's over the flat part of the card will need double the foam tape. Also, the part that's laying flat on the owl panel will be adhered with just straight up Tombow to make sure that it sticks and doesn't move around. Right at the bottom. I'm using the Stella red to highlight the heart on the owl. At this point, I realized that I didn't do that for the prototype, so I have to do that too. I'm moving very slowly to make sure that I don't make a mistake at this point and end up with a red streak across the card after I spent so much time coloring it. I'm also going to add a little bit of sparkle for the beak. It'd have been better if I had an orange sparkle pen, but I didn't, so I used what I had, which was gold. And I also wanted to sparkle the eyes. I grabbed the blue Wink of Stella, but after I put it on there, it was a little bit dark. I didn't care for how it looked. So for the other owl, I went and grabbed back the same blue that I had used in the coloration of the coat and colored in the eyes blue. And then I grabbed the Spectrum Noir sparkle pen and just went over the top of the blue eyes with that. I think that looked a lot better. So that's the card for today. It's a little early for my sister's birthday by at least 2 months, but I wanted to make the card early because it was so cute. I thank you for watching. I hope you found something that is useful for you, and I hope you'll be watching more of my videos. Thank you. Take care.